Civilized Society.
Welcome to the Silver Eye Society podcast. We are back with another one of our October episodes where we cover only horror to match the tone of our society these days. So let's get into some horror, some classic horror. It can be a difficult word. I want to say some classic horror. Children of the Corn. We got a lot of art, like a little hard R sounds in this episode. I don't like it. It's a real test for my articulation abilities. So
night is his time. One of the classic quotes from Children of the Corn, spoken by the character Malachi, a quote which I watched this film early 2000s, and I adopted that line throughout the last 22 years of my life.
Is that where it comes from?
That's where it comes from, yeah.
Oh my
Night
God.
is his time. Now, this is a brief...
This
you know,
is
because I
amazing
said
for
that.
me. Yeah, I know. I never knew it came from that.
Malachi, he leans in to Linda Hamilton when he's like got her through this town or whatever, and he says, "Night is his time," and that's what I realized that was the theme of my life. Go ahead with your intro.
Okay, that's great. That's a good intro. Yeah. So, Children of the Corn. We're gonna take it easy with this episode. The thing is, this movie didn't really grip me. It's a classic. It's worth discussing, but it's not particularly good as a film. So we'll talk a little bit about that maybe. And
what is good though? What everyone waits for, what everyone labors through your introduction to get to. Do you know what segment that is?
The word of the podcast is his time.
The word of the podcast. The word of the podcast. Harvest. Old English. Harvest. That's how they said it back in the old English days. You know that?
I like that.
Harvest. Okay. Autumn. As one of the four seasons. It meant autumn to the early Anglo-Saxons.
Oh.
The old Saxons.
Okay.
The period between August and November. So the harvest just meant autumn to those people.
I view
could
it
pronounce a lot of other things.
as a verb. To me, it's a verb.
Well, if you wanted the verb, that is circa 1400, like so many words of the podcast, a noun of wild animals. It's not a good entry. I don't know what's going on here. Anyway, are you ready for the Proto-Indo-European roots?
Yeah.
Or should I?
When am I not?
Kerp. To gather, pluck, or harvest. Kerp. Now, I think with the Proto-Indo-European, you got the K and the H. It's a little bit different. Anyway, I won't bore you with the Proto-Indo-European roots. That's really about it.
Kerp?
You know, the figure... Be careful where you'll get lost in the corn rows of etymology if you're not careful. You're not ready for Proto-Indo-European. None of our viewers are at this point.
All right. Let's go to some corn folklore. Okay, that's what we're ready for. I have a lot of issues, and I don't even know where to start. Yeah. Well, I don't know where to start with this film because on the one hand, it's not great as a film. Like, there's a lot of cheesiness. The character Malachi, like with the red hair, absolutely aggravating face on a human being. Like, I really don't like the acting of, and this is a child, so it's hard for me to go, I don't want to go, vicious on this child actor, but look, if you're gonna ruin your childhood to be in films, at least be a good child actor, for Christ's sake. I did not like.
He
was like a surfer dude in the Midwest as the henchman of a corn cult, and was like, "Night is his time, bro." Like, that's not the vibe.
You're wrong about so many things, and also about this movie. Also, Isaac is one of the best child actors ever to exist.
Yes.
He was great. He carries the movie.
Yeah, no, Isaac is one of the redeeming actors on the film. Everybody else is pretty mediocre at best, besides the protagonist. The protagonist is the only, which I don't know his name. The protagonist is the only one that's like a respectable actor, this role in the film. Other than that, I think I have Isaac energy sometimes on the podcast. I bring Isaac energy, cult leader, the only one that can divine his word for the peasantry kind of vibes. Would you agree?
No, I don't. I think you're a kind of ancillary character in the film, to be honest with you.
Am I the traumatized psychic child? That's the other child character that I identified with.
I feel like you're more the failed cult leader girl that's in there. At
That's
the end,
really
they just kind of. I really felt like that was really more of your style. I feel like if anyone, I'm more the Isaac at the podcast. I mean,
I see that's a little bit. I actually don't. You're more of the old man with truck.
not really. He was a fool. We better get into some heavy stuff
Okay.
here instead of just this chit chat about films. You know?
So where shall we go with this film? You
to
had
Children
a
of
good.
the Corn 7, because they made, I think, at least seven
You're
Children of the
joking.
Corn films.
I didn't
So-
even know that.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that
Sequels
speaks
galore.
to one point, that I think that this film is a victim of like corporate interests and like moneyed influences in filmmaking. I think that this era of film, and I said this to you earlier, that it's such a stagnant, stale film. Like, despite being a great story, and having, this character Isaac that's so fascinating, it had all the right ingredients, but something's deeply castrated in the film. There is a lack of artistry in it. It's very strange and upsetting and boring in that way. And it kind of just makes me think, like, were there like these board directors or something being like, it has to be this length, or you have to make sure that it has this character, whatever. Like stuff like that, where they think that they've figured out the formula for successful films, and then they end up just making these cookie cutter, bland films, because this really felt that way.
Don't know. Stephen King, obviously is known for big ups and big downs.
Yeah, but the story is different from the film. I think that the film, I've never read the book, but I think that the film actually is, like, if you did it differently, it could be better. It's like that.
Sure. Well, they tried multiple times. They've made many sequels. But yeah, I never read Children of the Corn as a book either. And I've read probably, if I had to guess, I'd say I've read 30 Stephen King novels, something around that. I've read a lot. He was a very important writer to me as a youth.
I'm reading On Writing now, his book On Writing. It's good.
All right.
It's weird that he lost his mind politically.
Yeah, well, that
Sad.
takes us to one of the kind of themes of this film with the main character, because he's been accused of shit libbery. And my opinion was, you had a higher opinion of this protagonist. I saw him in a different light. And I saw him as kind of the culmination of this kind of, I hate to do the baby boomer thing, like put down the baby boomer people, but this would be about, when was this film made?
70s? 80s? I think 80s.
You don't know.
80s.
Okay, good research.
I
So I think it was
researched
probably
in my
early,
brain.
probably early 80s.
It looks 80s.
The
I
first
just meant that
thing,
it took place in the 70s. You understand? I think it's set.
You don't know. You don't know anything. You're just making things up. Stop making things up. It's not necessary. Our audience trusts us not to just make things up.
I'm not, though. It's an informed estimate.
Okay, so the point is, this guy, he reminds me of this type of some problems, right? The first thing that happens is he runs over a child, and his first reaction is to go to kind of not take the blame. And to be fair, I don't blame him. The kid ran out into the road. You can't really blame him for that. But it's just telling to me that the first thing that happens is he goes and he investigates in the corn rows. And he's like, and the first thing he says, he comes back and he says, it wasn't our fault. It wasn't my fault. He was already dead when he was in the road. Well, he wasn't already dead. He obviously had walked into the road, But there's that thing. And then another aspect of this character that I feel like is indicative of something about this great country of ours, which includes the state of Nebraska, by the way. He's this kind of, he's a careerist. I think, what is he, a doctor?
Yeah,
Is
he's
he a
going
doctor?
to start a job in Seattle as a doctor.
Yeah, he's going to go start his job in Seattle, and that's great and all that. When confronted by the... It's just, and again, of course, yes, some of this is a bad movie, but when confronted by a demonic spirit, which he sees furrowing underground and trying to kill people, there's no real recognition that he's face to face with something deeper. And there's this a lot of things that irritated me about the character the whole time. It's this kind of like, he gets there and they go down to this basement, there's all these supplies, and the kid says, they made this bunker for the communists, in case the communists bomb us. And he's like, I don't think you need to worry about the communists. You better worry about these religious freaks, and it's just very... It's like, well,
snide, okay. Kind of like it's very characteristic of a kind of like shitlib we see now, this shitlib archetype. But now we've seen the damage that comes of that kind of snideness and disrespect for why the fence was there before you tore it down, kind of thing. Now we see what happens when that kind of persona ends up in places of power, like in media and in science communication, where they take it upon themselves to decide what is important and what is not, and they scoff at the lowly plebs who actually they need the help to be there because they're the ones that have like driven in the wrong direction and can't get to where they're going and run a child over in the street because they're like playing around in the car or whatever. So I have the sense that you do too.
And the way he solves the problem too, like there's no moment where he kind of like looks at the situation as like, okay, this is, and I'm not taking the side of the religious cult Children of the Corn either. I'm neutral on this. I'm just saying that the way he confronts the problem is this very mechanistic way of, let's try to hook up gasoline or what is essentially ethanol, I think, made from corn, but it's called like cornahol or something in the movie, or alka gasoline or something. He tries to like hook up this hose to this, right? But then he's incompetent. He can't actually even do it. He has to have a child help him to do this like very basic thing, and then he tries to throw the Molotov cocktail, but he fails to do that too. He has to then send the child into danger, which his whole thing was, get back, child, or whatever, don't be in danger. And the kid's like, the kid
you're
literally
not doing
anything right.
Brings the Molotov cocktail back to him and says, throw it right this time.
Right. It's just, there's something about, and I'm curious about how people would have viewed that character back in that time too, because
this is what I think is important, like briefly, is that I think that we're looking back at a time when no one saw the dark side of that kind of perspective, that kind of outlook. And now we're kind of in that, like, I guess you could call it kind of black-pilled place where these ideals of like, oh, just be rational, religion is dumb. Like now it's like, oh, great, because then politics turns into religion and people treat their politics with the same ideological religious fervor that they condemned in actual religious people. So I think there's like this sense that it's not the same. The way it was perceived then, like, I think it's like cool or whatever, which I find a little bothersome, because then it's like, so who are the bad guys in this film? It kind of has this trope of making the Midwest and rural people this scary backwards land where madness grows, kind of thing.
So this goes into some of the brief notes that I jotted down on this film that I wanted to touch on, even though I agree with you. I didn't like it very much. I'd seen it, obviously
I'd seen
when
it
I was
too.
Younger and all that, but it's forgettable. But I have tried to curate our films this October towards the folk horror side of things, so we could kind of look a little bit at what's going on here. And I wanted to
I like folk horror. I just want to say it. That's my favorite genre.
Well, then let's investigate.
I think I think it's feminine. I think folk horror is more feminine.
I don't. Okay, well, why don't you support your point?
Oh, I just wanted to see what you would say to that.
There's a alarm
I don't have much
going
support
off
for
outside.
it. That's weird. I
was
don't
going
hear
to pick
it.
up on the audio. Don't know.
Uh-oh. Well, I don't hear it, so.
Yeah, well, the viewers will. Okay, so, no, if you're going to say something, actually, go ahead and
Because it's of the
continue with it.
earth. It's pagan. It's of the earth. And all of these things are like more of the old world and the chthonic or whatever and of nature as coming after man. And I think that is of the feminine in like the more, what would you say, literary sense, not as like it's biologically female.
No, it's paganism. It's early Christian paganism. That's what
But
I'm going
that's
to get
feminine.
at is that, yeah, no, I know, but it's also, I'm not going to,
It's enough. I didn't
Judge
want to
it.
go that far with it. I just wanted to
Well,
throw it out there.
so in this film, did you catch the problem at the beginning? It starts 3 years prior to when the film actually takes place. And it was a very small thing. On the church sign, they have the church service at the very beginning. It's talking about a drought. So there's a drought. There's a natural calamity that's occurring in the corn crop there. Now, The Witch also has this, another folk horror classic.
Oh, yeah.
Has it more where the guy gets put outside of the village system kind of, and now has to survive on his own, and nature just kind of overtakes him. He can't do it. I don't remember if there's specifically a crop failure or something like that in that, but it's the same thing. Nature is basically overcoming the ability of humankind. Texas Chainsaw Massacre also, I think they do, I don't know if they say particularly there was a drought or a problem, but they make it, I feel like on the radio, they do talk about that. The very first scene of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where they show the like crucified, gruesome image of that person, there's a radio program going on. I feel like they talk about a drought. And then there was another folk horror, The Wicker Man. So same thing. Now, what happens to the Wicker Man? In the Wicker Man, the
Failed
crops are
crops.
going to fail. And so what happens? They have to have a human sacrifice. And so I think this is a theme in folk horror movies, and it's a theme for a reason. And it's because, in reality, there really were, it's thought that there were, if not human sacrifices, though there were, this idea of Persephone and Demeter, which are these Greek goddesses of cultivation and harvesting and agriculture. One of the big festivals, which was only open to women, by the way, for your point, what they would ritualistically slaughter pigs and throw them into a pit, and then sometime afterwards go down to the pit. Certain people who had gone through these rituals of cleansing would go down into the pit, take the decomposed bodies of the pigs up and put them on an altar, and rituals would ensue. So this is something I don't think that the people that are like Wiccans and they like go out and they take Instagram pictures of the fall leaves and they're like, I'm a pagan. Like, okay, that's fine. But do you want to go down to the pit and pick up the decomposed pigs and, like slaughter?
Well, this is my point of all New
People.
Age religion, is that there's not a lot of stakes to it. At least when you have the like things like Christianity or whatever, they're not supposed to have sex before marriage, or like, there's certain things that they're not supposed to do, which I think is a show and a test of commitment to one's beliefs. If you can just be like, today I do something and today I don't, and if it's this very a la carte, like relaxed, only positives, no sacrifice to it, no discomfort to it, I think that you're going to have an equally lacking in passion connection to the practice. So these kind of things like that, I mean, you got a human sacrifice. That's the utmost. Now, I'm not recommending any human sacrifices to deepen your connection to
both
Wicca.
both episodes we've had to say we're not recommending human sacrifice. We're just exploring some of the positive aspects of it and how it can make. It's not great.
That's exactly what I anticipated my life would turn out to be. So yeah, go on though. Folk horror and the like.
Yeah. So that's one of the themes.
So what can the people learn from folk horror? What here's the thing. Yeah, I think that our beliefs are kind of lackadaisical. Is that the right word? Is that right? It's just like they're not really tethered to anything deep and strong, it seems like, or at least you have to forge those tethers yourself as an individual now. I don't know. I
I'm
feel
not
like people
here
are
to
kind
do
of
self-help
middling.
guru stuff on the internet. I don't know what I can't bring this around to some point to make everyone's life better.
Well,
I'm just throwing out. I'm
you
just giving the
always
Proto-Indo-European
do this
roots of words here.
and
Okay?
get all, surly about the idea of possibly being helpful, God forbid. I like to try to solve Earth's mysteries. Thank you. So that's what I
How's
want.
that working out?
It's pretty good, okay?
Is it?
Pretty
Okay,
good. At least it's not boring, so there's that.
Yeah. Good. The more folk horror.
More?
Yeah. So the other thing happens in folk horror films, obviously. I guess here I'll give you some advice. The outsider goes into a small town. That's another thing that always happens, right? Or seems to happen. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that's what happens. This film, this is what happens. The Wicker Man is a policeman from somewhere in mainland Scotland or whatever going to the small island. There's always that thing. And what happens in the movies anyway, it seems like, is that the viewer gets clued in that something's radically wrong before the actual protagonist does, which is kind of makes that part of it not very fun to watch. Like, but I didn't mind in The Wicker Man, but this movie I was like, hey, like, what are you doing? This movie's bad because no one seemed to.
Well, they're kind of
like
all
this
dumb.
It wasn't dumb. It was like this very unfeeling. Like, you just ran over a kid in the street.
I'm
like,
telling you, it's
should
very
be,
stale.
Linda Hamilton did a better job. She
No,
was
she
like
didn't.
upset.
She was terrible.
She was
She
at least
overacted
trying
the
to act
shit out of the
upset.
film. It overacted the shit out of the film. She did everything that is annoying when a character does. Like, the guy's like, lock the doors and don't come out. The kid, maybe someone murdered him. And the first thing I hear a noise, let me unlock the door and step out. Girl, I don't even care about you anymore. I don't care about
She
you when
didn't
you
do
do
that. That was a dream.
No, it's
Remember,
wrong to
she
even
wakes
do it
up
in a
and, like,
dream.
they-
But she also does things like, see, this is where the feminist critique has some, at least once upon a time, had some value to it. Was you look at a character you're like that, and you're like, that's the best you can do. That's the most interesting companion you can come up with for this man. What purpose does she serve other than as this like nagging symbolism of his need to commit to maturity in life, which is probably the only coherent and meaningful theme that I found in the movie was this character who's kind of juvenile and snide and naive, in his sense of not understanding the gravity of the situation they walk into until it's very late in the situation. This character, he's like snubbing her and doesn't want to get married or something. And she's like being very petulant about trying to, push him into marriage, which is an obnoxious trait for that character, but also for people. And so we kind of watch him like have to confront some dark evil and take responsibility for his role in this situation, protect her, save the children, stand up to these authoritarian forces. Essentially, this is what it is, these kind of bullies that rule this, children with fear. And so he comes in and is like the man of the situation. And fine, that's probably the most coherent storyline that I can actually like relate to as something that's human and feels nice to watch play out. And then at the end, it's like, now you have a family. Ta-da! Like they just like kidnap the two kids and they're like, we're gonna like it's implied that okay, now he'll get married, now he'll have the kids, and now they're going to their shit-lib paradise in Seattle. But like you said, the character seems to remain unchanged. He still has this kind of snideness about him. He's just also a hero now, which is kind of insufferable.
He's not even a hero. He just beat up some kids, kind of like, and not even good in a
well,
good way.
He fought
like,
the
he got
demon
stabbed.
thing at the end.
Kinda, yeah.
That
Which
was the
is
main boss fight. Was the demon thing.
I hate to do this in podcasts. We don't like to analyze movies too hard.
It's when they're bad that it's you gotta.
It is. They have to go to the movie Gulag, which we haven't really done as a.
This
I
is
mean,
a
I'm going to
pretty
suggest
close
that
to
maybe
a movie Gulag.
I can't put it in the movie Gulag though because that one line has informed my entire life.
You don't want to have
I can't.
a movie Gulag line be your byline for
I'm
life.
too attached to that. Night is his time, but there's. I lost my
Night is his
I lost my
time.
train of thought because I was thinking about how night is his time.
It
love that
it
line
is
so
a
much.
great line.
I remember I watched it on a VCR, and I would
Whoa.
rewind it a few times to watch that one. I was like, this is truly my philosophy.
That's awesome.
Oh, I remember. The problem is when you solve. Okay, so I've done a lot of analysis of the horror genre in my own mind, mainly. They solve a supernatural problem with a physical solution, and that's actually always a bad way to write a movie, because it's implied that there is some actual demonic force as opposed to a kind of physical reality, even though they also show a physical reality, and there's zero explanation for what this really was.
Dude, you have the kid Isaac comes back as a zombie ghoul, and they're just
randomly.
like, let's just run, and then that plot line just dies. He's content to just take Malachi and never come back again, I guess. But somehow we're supposed to believe that also the demonic entity in the earth, in the cornfields, has been extinguished with cornahol or whatever it is they sprayed on it.
Right. It's really
It's frustrating.
It's really not. It's not good.
I think it's a good example of the failure of the folk horror, not the genre, but like a failure to apply an understanding of what makes folk horror powerful and good. Because, like you said, like that physical. This is also a storytelling flaw. You can't use a physical solution for fighting the demonic, and that's why that the character doesn't grow, because he has the protagonist feels exactly the same at the end of the film, because there was no requirement for him to transcend something to be able to overcome that obstacle that is the demonic entity. He just set it on fire and then was like, all right, we're done. So you get that. And that's why it's dissatisfying to watch it as an audience, because it's like, okay, so anybody could do that. Like, he's not growing. I don't resonate with this. It's just like,
maybe the power was with the corn and the corn itself.
yeah,
going
it's
up
supposed to
in
be that the
flames.
cornfield is cursed, whatever. But like, again, you have to great, but he would have had to figure something out to come to that conclusion that required some humility on his part, or some understanding that there are things that I don't understand in this world, even though I have my books and my science and my snideness. You know, that would have been character development.
Correct, and that was my whole point of this. I just used the term shit library, but that's not even really the right term. It's really the modern American experience in a lot of ways. It's like he gets confronted with this thing which should completely blow his concept of the world away, and he ignores it. At the end, he just ignores it. He just drive away, and they just ignore it.
Yeah,
and there's something about that I feel like I think it's going to be weird, because I think that we're kind of in the first generation of people that are really living out the consequences of, for better or for worse, a large segment of society not having any religious belief. Mm-hmm. And I'm not here to give the Ezekiel's. I'm not trying to get you to go into the cornfield and sacrifice the blue man or whatever. I'm just saying there is going to be some sort of weird consequence to that.
Well, we've already seen people try to sacrifice the blue man, so they defunded
there was another
him.
aspect to that. I mean, there are many small things in this film that I had issues with, like. There obviously was some. The weird thing is there were obviously some authority figures, the blue man being the cop, that tried to stop this, and then also the minister. I think, though I don't think he was ever pictured. He kind of maybe tried to stop it, but there's something. There are some things. I don't want to blame Stephen King for it, because maybe he's just showing how the world is starting to be, you know. But I feel like he's also making some sort of weird judgments about it, but.
Well, he's a little bit, he is a shit lib, like, and he is that today. But like in his earlier writing, like in the book that I'm reading from him right now, he does make those kind of like, he is kind of reflected in this protagonist that has this disdain for the uneducated fundamentalist types of the Midwest. And he makes points of that in his book, that it's like, who cares if I upset the Christian ladies' reading room by having a graphic scene? It's like, yeah, well, how do you feel about that when the tables are turned? When when it's not the Christian ladies' reading room that's coming after you. It's like some activist group for inclusive literature on your local campus who's decided that actually you're the fundamentalist pleb that needs to be educated. Do you still have that judgment?
He comes from a certain time. This is why I kind of forgive. I really just kind of forgive everybody over 65, 70
Yeah, they're
years
not in
old
the game anyway. Who cares?
You're right. I mean, and also I'm a little bit old enough to understand that there was still in like the 80s, and he comes from obviously a generation where the hippies and that kind of stuff. There was something more to push back against.
Yes.
You know, I think you could say to some degree in the 80s there was a kind of hell and brimstone type preaching.
For sure. Real censorship, real, fundamentalist.
They didn't get too far on censorship by that time. But I mean, there was certainly a fundamentalist religion
there
thing.
was a push.
And he reminds me of Reddit. That's what he reminds me of. Like
Really?
people on Reddit, they're like atheists. They're like, this is dumb and it's science and stuff. It's like, okay, true. Sometimes true. But you're only seeing half the scene here. And if you only see half the scene, the fucking one who walks behind the rows will eventually, he will eventually take you down, you know?
This is a fundamentalist podcast. I'm not sure what we're fundamental about, but I think it has fundamentalist energy. The one who walks behind the rows. I like that.
That's the name of the thing.
Yeah, I like it. I like that kind of, I like a little bit of the flamboyant biblical language. I employ that in my writing sometimes. It's zesty. It's spicy. They wrote the Bible. They threw in some zingers in there. I don't know what you would even call that kind of style of writing. It feels very distinct to me. It has this flavor to it that's so, I guess it's fire and brimstone.
Do you want me to tell you why so you understand? It's because the King James Bible was translated in the 1600s. So you're getting the first parts of early modern English.
That's it.
Like essentially around the time of Shakespeare. And so you're getting that type of, when you read the only Bible version you should read, the King James Bible, which is that and not this New World Testament bullshit or whatever it is. All these other, they made a bunch of other translations later because they're like, we need to modernize the language so that the Christians
It's going to be like Jesus showed up to the disciples' dinner and was like, what's up, guys? Haha, YOLO.
It's not that. It's written in a very plain way. And I reject that. You want to go get my King James Bible? I have it over here.
You got 5 minutes.
I bought one because I was like, I need that. To me, the King James Bible, that is a foundation stone of anyone who wants to be able to write well in the English language.
It's got some great writing in there, and that's why the best parts of the Children of the Corn come from pulling those kind of biblical-esque verses into the writing. He who walks behind the rows and his time is night. So we'll close out with those. Not it. His night is his time.
Night is his time.
His time is night. All right. We've gone into many interesting things here, and night is our time. The sun is setting, and the sun is setting on this episode. So please subscribe. Let us know what you think about the Children of the Corn, because while I respect it and it is a classic, I think there's some problems. And I wonder if those problems are tied into larger themes that our wonderful viewers might identify. So let us know, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Silver Eye Society.
And let us know if you'd like us to cover Children of the Corn 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. in the comments below.